Welcome to Delivered, the show where we talk about building successful digital products and businesses. My name is Chris Bradshaw. I'm the Product Strategy Director here at Infinum, and I'll be your host for today. Now, my guest today is a great guest. His name is Jonathan Dambrot. Who is Jonathan? Well, he's the CEO and co-founder of Cranium AI. Who is Cranium AI? Well, they're a leading AI security and trust platform that has just spun out of KPMG. And Jonathan has over 20 years of experience in IT, cybersecurity, and third-party risk management. So it's safe to say Jonathan, you could say, is somewhat of a visionary / industry leader who drives confidence and trust in the use of that thing we're all talking about these days, secure artificial intelligence. Now, a quick reminder before we talk to Jonathan, there's a Q&A box. In that box, please put your questions, keep them short, concise, and we'll try and get through as many as we can at the end of the show. And hopefully speak to Jonathan about each of your questions. So with that being said, let's go meet Jonathan. Let's go. Well, hello, Jonathan. Welcome to Delivered.
Welcome. Yeah, thanks. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
It's great to have you, and thank you for joining us. I know you're a super busy man, and this topic as well that we're about to talk about is something I know comes up again and again. I'm really excited to get into it, and hearing your credentials as well, I know how much you have a legacy of this kind of knowledge in the space. So I'd love to kind of just ease into this really, and maybe find out about you. Who are you? How did you come on this career path to Cranium AI?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I'm the CEO and co-founder of Cranium. This has been a wild journey for me, to be honest. So, if I look at my background, prior to spinning this out, I was a partner at KPMG and focused on a couple of different areas, one of them being third-party security. So I led the practice for third-party security at KPMG globally. And I was using a lot of AI in my practice. And it was really interesting because we were trying to solve problems. I had run another company called Prevalent prior to going to the firm. I sold that to a private equity firm, and I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And KPMG reached out and said, "Do you want to run third party?" I said, "Yeah, but I want to do it in a different way. If it's just about doing the same things that we've done historically, I'm not that interested." And KPMG offered me a unique opportunity to come in as a senior partner and start to work on how do we solve third-party risk and security. And I was able to work with just some tremendous talent when I was at the firm around AI and machine learning. And we had built a set of models. We built like 16 different models in support of this. And we recognized that basically there really wasn't any, security around. So I started seeing this. And so I pitched the firm on on creating a platform to support the security of AI. And this firm was just super supportive. So, I've always been an entrepreneur. I ran, this is now my fourth company. I started in high school. I started a magic company. So I was a magician growing up. Most people don't know that. That's like a little known fact. And that's how I paid for college. And I basically manufactured 3 magic tricks I sent around the world, and I performed every weekend, and that was a lot of fun. And then when I got to college, I decided I wanted to be a chocolatier. My grandfather was in the chocolate business. I said, "Oh, that sounds awesome." And my mother's like, "No, you're not doing that. You're staying in college." And so we had this whole discussion about this. And then finally, I started Prevalent when I was in graduate school and getting my MBA, and kind of built a business focused on how do we change the way things work. And that's been kind of the mantra since then, is like, how do we change the way third party works? When I got to KPMG, I wanted to continue that mission, and had an opportunity to really start looking at machine learning, and then recognizing again that there was an opportunity to think about security. And I pitched the firm, and they gave me my first $3 million to go start building this business. And we had an agreement that we'd build something to go spin it out. And we became the first spin out ever from KPMG Studio. And it was a wild ride. We worked with Infinum on that project as well. And it's just been wild to watch it go. And now we have some of the best investors in the world. We've got some of the biggest clients in the world. It's been absolutely wild ride.
Yeah, I love that story as well, because we've had the pleasure of working like with yourself. We've worked with KPMG, and I know how much it goes into these things to kind of even validate and prove something is worth even building, investing in, just generally turning into a product or a business. So, I mean, kudos to you and the team for making that happen, which I think is a commendable feat. And I also love your backstory as well about the magician and the chocolatier. It's like true entrepreneur from like, the early days. I can
You
only
never met
like,
a, you never met a software guy who had a chocolate business and and a magic business before that. What do you mean? I thought
I,
that was
I, I feel like I've missed out on something in my childhood. I think the best I wanted to be was the movie, The Karate Kid. That was or The Karate Kid.
yeah,
That
yeah,
was
like
my, yeah.
yeah.
That was exactly, yeah. That was the thing. My parents were like, "You can't be that, Chris." I'm like, "But I want to be Daniel LaRusso. That's all I want to be." I mean,
I think we
maybe
all wanted to be Danny LaRusso. I have to tell you, that was growing up. We all wanted that, and we all
thank
have
you.
to settle at some point.
Absolutely, thank you for that. I feel validated and heard all at once now. So thank you for that. So going back to the business, so Cranium AI sounds great, and again, well done on that whole raise and growth of that. Let's talk about the idea of the company, how it was born. Like, where did that come from as a business?
Yeah. So, when we started incubating, the idea of Cranium was born because, inside of my practice, I was starting to take a lot of sensitive data for some of the largest companies in the world. We were putting them through those models I was describing. So, we were using these AI and ML systems to help support really changing the way third party risk was happening. And then we were putting them into endpoints and into production. And I said, when are we going to secure this stuff? Like, when's the security conversation happen?
Mm,
And they go and said, "What do you mean?" And I said, "What do you mean? What do I mean?" Like it was just this conversation I couldn't understand. So finally, I started recognizing, like, there's so much innovation happening so quickly, but people aren't necessarily ready to have a conversation around the security of these pipelines. And we're starting to see this go at a pace like nobody could believe. And we were solving really big problems. Like, in one case, we had, an assessment project where this customer had tens of thousands of vendors, and they were only able to do about 500 manual assessments a year. And with these models we had built out, we were able to actually do 50,000 assessments a day, right? It was just this wild exponential opportunity. And so we said, this is the future. This is where we're going to spend our time, but we now need to focus on security. So I wrote my business plan and my pitch deck. This was done over a weekend. To be honest, it was probably the worst pitch deck anyone has ever seen in the history of the world. And I pitched it to the firm. And as I said, people have a different view of, the big four or KPMG. I will tell you, my experience was fantastic. I, always had a lot of support for these initiatives at the
mm,
firm. And so the firm said, let's go, like, let's get going. And so we stood this up inside of the KPMG Studio, which at the time I wasn't even aware had been started. We were the first project to go through that, and we really
mm,
started thinking about, who would our design partners be? And I started
mm.
talking to the clients that I had been serving. Again, the largest financial services, largest life sciences companies, largest CPG companies in the world. And by the way, these still remain our clients, right, today. And
Wow.
so we started to identify, and as we were building threat models and thinking about how the software would interact and who our users would be, we learned so much through that process. We learned that, people were not ready for this. Like, we were at the very beginning. People, in a lot of
Mm,
ways, didn't even understand what artificial intelligence or machine learning meant inside their environments. They, in some cases, didn't know what was happening with, different businesses that were
yeah.
using AI and ML in their practices and in their divisions, and how all of that was happening. So it was eye opening as we were going through this process, like, asking questions: who should own this? What would be, if in a perfect world, what would be something that people, would want to know about, and then trying to outline what the threats and risks would look like,
Mm,
based on their use of AI and their intended vision for what that would look like. And then obviously Gen AI, as that hit, and we started thinking about these pieces, where the kind of machine learning environment was going, and then all of a sudden,
yeah.
having to pivot with these companies who wanted to start using generative AI and those models as well, and how that intersection happened just was mind blowing. So as we
Yeah.
started to really work with our design partners around how to think about those things, it was really, really intriguing.
Yeah, and you really made me think of something there. And I think a lot of the client base we work with at Infinum as well, it's almost like they don't have to be necessarily an AI centric based business now, but obviously they want to be at some point. And I think what you're saying there about the idea of like consulting design partners meets engineering as well is like that's something that we specialize in quite a bit here, just to help almost guide the kind of process of, dare I say, like transformation, but almost more around the idea of how do you embrace AI in a useful sense, but a secure way as well. And that's what really made me lean into like what Cranium does, because one of the things at the minute is I think efficiency is always like an outcome that people want to achieve from AI, but I suppose with those outcomes comes risks, and with that security, I suppose can sometimes be overlooked. Chasing those low hanging fruits that AI promises a business to have a competitive edge or something different to their other competitor over here. I wonder what's changed over the years though, because like you're saying, the kind of maturity of what AI is and what ML is now is more common parlance to people in a kind of a language sense. But from your experience, like, how have you seen the kind of security part of that really, you know, like say exponentially go up with the growth of AI?
I think there's more awareness. I think what generative AI did for a lot of people, it's democratize AI in a real world sense, right? Now I could use
Mm.
ChatGPT. I could actually see the power of this in my own, on my laptop. I could go to a
Mhm.
website and I could have a lot of things that, fundamentally I just never could do before as an individual. It was like an iPhone moment, right?
Yeah.
Now, I think you're actually seeing even more machine learning and generative AI coming into these environments. At a pace which I find astounding. I don't think we've seen this level of transformation from a technology perspective, even as we've all lived through, the birth of the internet, and well, maybe not all of us, but many of us lived through the birth of the
Yeah.
internet,
Yeah.
and seeing a lot of these things. We're seeing a transformation happening in real time that at a pace we've just never seen before. So, what does
Mhm.
that mean if I'm integrating either Gen AI or machine learning into almost every application, and every business is now an AI business? Now I need to think about these threats in a different way, and maybe these discussions have come up, but now they're really
Mhm.
becoming meaningful as, again, we're putting the most sensitive data. We're bringing in, every application that we run is now AI enabled, or trying to be. We've got Gen AI use cases and some enterprises that are reaching hundreds or thousands of use cases. And a lot of this just happened, right? It happened within the last year.
Yeah.
We haven't even set up in some cases the appropriate governance. So this is the collision, right? It's the collision between
Mhm.
large scale transformation, emerging technology, and the need to get these types of returns, but understanding that, like, if we don't do this right, we're going to potentially face real problems in the future about
Right.
the impact of this, the impact on people, the impact on our information, and how we think about how we move that
Yeah.
forward.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I always think about the idea of when we talk to clients from our kind of like a discovery phase from our world before we even get close to any kind of production side. And it's almost asking, what are the opportunities, first of all, that AI presents? And of course, everyone has a ton of ideas around that. But then it's like, okay, well, what are we actually doing with it? Is it a process automation? Is it product and service augmentation? Is it a whole new business, in your case, to be spun up? I think you're right. Like there needs to be a threshold in the middle between the technology being checked, possibly the ethical and security reasons right after that as
Yeah.
well, because that's as important. And actually, then what does that mean for the people involved before you start to MVP and POC and all the other buzzwords that we use in product to build a new thing? It's like, where does that sit both in the technology, but almost in the human part as well? Because they're kind of like almost becoming one, really, where, the whole ecosystem becomes almost like a cyborg that needs to be considered on both sides, right? The
Well,
humanistic part and the technology part.
it's so interesting when you say that, because when we first started this process, and Infinum, did a lot of the design
Mm.
thinking and workshopping and design work that helped us build the product out even from the very beginning. It's changed, right? It's fundamentally changed even over this short amount of time, because I think the prioritization of AI. We were even just trying to think about the features that would be necessary. What are the threats? How do we think about it? They're happening at such a pace. So, I think what's happening now is that as organizations are thinking about the future of emerging technology and
Mm.
building this in, and how AI is going to fundamentally impact, they're having to create architectures that are going to support that level of innovation, right? So how do
Yeah.
I make this? How do I change it? How do I create a design? At least in the case that we worked on, like, how do we create a design that can fundamentally shift and is easy to shift into those new things and add new features as we start to see these types of technologies take foot. And we've been very fortunate because we brought in really strong talent on the AI security side. We brought on strong talent on the AI side, and we've obviously had great design support.
Mm.
So the combination of these things has allowed us to really build something that we can kind of move at pace and as necessary, because a lot of the initial things that we started talking about weren't really the things that ultimately clients really needed. And so we've had to be
Sure.
flexible and be able to pivot into those areas. And I think that's really a requirement today. The cycle times have just gotten so tight.
Yeah, so true. It's so true. I always think back to the sort of the idea of what it looks like as a business owner these days. You're already under pressure to build and operate in such a competitive market. But if I was to be not Chris at Infinum, but a business owner of a large scale organization, you know, you want to move at speed and do these AI things. But obviously, there's security and threats, out
Mm-hmm.
there because of the byproducts. Like, how would you say that, Chris, the business owner, how would I address them in a sane manner before leaping firstly into like the promise of AI without addressing the perils?
Yeah, so let's start, by talking a little bit about, I'm a huge believer that AI is going to fundamentally change things for the better. So in that way, I'm a bit of a utopian. Like I look forward and I think about the fact that like we are going to be in a better fundamental state 50 years from now than we are
Yeah.
today, just like 50 years we are from 50 years ago, right? If we look at our
Mm.
life and the impact of technology, I would say the mass majority of people are way better off. And I think that's something that I think will start to continue to accelerate. And we have
Yeah.
huge problems, right? We have major problems on this planet. And I think we need things like AI to help support. So I'm going to put that there now, because we're going to talk a lot about some scary stuff, right? Like when you talk about
Cool.
AI threats, you get into
Yeah.
these interesting conversations that I think people, especially growing up, you mentioned, wanting to be the Karate Kid, right? Well, we
Yeah.
grew up in a time where you had major trust issues with AI. Like we grew up with AI movies, like The Terminator. People think about like that was
Yeah.
scary. Right? People think about AI enabled robots, and in every single sense, in every movie ever, they kill
Yeah.
us. Right? Like
Yeah.
that's the ultimate end of the story. And I think when we actually talk about the AI that we're using today in a corporate sense, we have an opportunity here to really fundamentally manage these risks appropriately today.
Mm.
That's why we went on this mission, because we felt like we had an obligation, but also, if we don't do something, these major issues that we think about could potentially happen. So as we're bringing really sensitive data, and we've seen the impact of data loss generally, from a cyber perspective, but as we're bringing really sensitive data into AI pipelines, and we're building using either kind of machine learning models, in some cases open source models, or generative models, or foundational models,
Mm.
and we're bringing these together to solve these incredible challenges. Now we need to think about threats, to that data. So we need to think about things like poisoning. We need to think about backdoors that are getting put into this. In a real sense, they're
Uh,
different than, in some cases, traditional software backdoors, and those are still issues, right? So like in addition to all the standard cyber stuff that we've been talking about for a long time,
forever.
we
Yeah.
now have
Yeah.
unique threats. And some of our
Mm.
like our AI leadership,
Yeah.
we had a gentleman who worked at MITRE. Some of you may use MITRE Attack Framework, or in this case, MITRE Atlas. So Josh Hargis on our team came over with a couple of people from MITRE, and helped develop some of those adversarial risks and
Mm.
understand them, and helped to develop what it meant to red team an AI system and how to think
Yeah.
about that. So in a real world sense, there's very unique challenges to these AI systems. And in some cases, they're open, and you can touch them, and how they're trained, and you get some visibility. But in a lot of cases, especially for those organizations that aren't necessarily building their own AI systems, but they're dependent on AI services, you now have kind of more gray box or black box, and you need different techniques to really open those up and understand them.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned a phrase there. I think for the people at home, a red box team. No, I think that was something to
Red team,
work.
yeah, AI red teaming.
Yeah, yeah. Could you give a little bit of insight as to why we need one of those and what it means for a business?
Yeah. So, if let's say you look at historically what AI, what red teaming really has been is, more like penetration testing, right? So if you think
Mm,
about it, a system, we're going to do everything we can to break into that system. And then we're going to publish a report on what that looks like. I think an AI system, if you look at how it's made up, the data, the toolkits, the model, the endpoint, et cetera,
yeah.
there's a set of unique things around the model. There's the interaction in the pipeline, and certainly different architecture. So in some cases for generative systems, if you're building like a retrieval augmented generation system, how you
Hmm.
have to think about the threats generated to your business based on what's in that architecture will determine how you actually have to go think about attacking it, what vulnerabilities there are. In some cases they're not completely like adversarial the way you think about them in terms of like somebody attacking them as like a hacker, but also just fundamentally, you mentioned some other areas. There are other areas you need to think about.
Mm,
So, how do
yeah.
you actually take an AI system, understand it, understand what those unique vulnerabilities are, whatever they might be? How do you actually go and see if the threats can be penetrated, and then how do
Yeah.
you report on that? So you need a special skill set. You need to have people who understand cyber. You need to have team members who understand the AI, and then you need tools that can kind of bridge the gap there.
Yeah, it's so true. I always think about this statement we always come out with when we're kind of leading people through a process to understand and discover what they need. It's like we're just there to be the guide; they're the heroes. But it also reminds me of a separate conversation we had on the previous episode of Delivered, where we talked to an AI specialist about it being circular. This whole thing's circular, so it's almost once you start this process and being guided through it, that whole process isn't just about the design anymore and the engineering now. It is about, like you're saying, the security, making sure it's doing the right things at the right time for people, and that the black box solution has some level of, like, I guess, security or control or understanding to help this circular motion keep going in a nice way, which I guess helps ultimately get over trust issues. I think that's probably something that's quite prevalent as well in AI. Like, yes, it has all this cool stuff that we keep seeing with the B2C stuff with ChatGTP and also at the kind of corporate level. But, I think it's also fair to say, like, and we see this a lot when we're kind of talking to clients about new potential AI solutions, like there's always like a level of trust there. I wonder if that is kind of going back to what you were saying earlier. Like, is that because Terminator's burned into our brains, or HAL?
Well,
You know?
I find it very strange, right? Because, although generally there's a lot of fear, I would say people fundamentally still trust AI systems more than we admit, right? From the
Mm,
very beginning,
mm,
when machine learning started to take foot, right? You heard these stories of people using GPS systems and then driving into lakes because the GPS told them to go there, right? We see similar things here.
yeah,
There's a gentleman who helps run AI red teaming for Microsoft. He wrote a book about this, and one of the chapters,
yeah,
his name is Ram. One of the chapters, starts off by talking about a study that they did that this scientist did, and what he did is he actually took a robot but made it perform in a way that was unintended. So when they led people into a building and the robot led them in, but it got lost. So these people followed this robot to get to their room, but it was not
yeah,
necessarily taking them there appropriately, and they had to actually bring them back to another room. Well, then they simulated a fire. And what
yeah,
was interesting about this is that there's smoke everywhere, there's an alarm going off, and this robot, which got them lost before, everybody still followed this dumb robot to
yeah,
their death, even though there were exit signs like "Go this way," and
yeah.
everybody still followed the robot. So we have this innate trust in the technology, in AI. I would say
Mm,
most people, have fundamentally trusted the output of generative systems, and we've seen impacts to that as well. They've over trusted the architectures that they've built into those systems and integrated them directly into applications, as an example, and seen some of those
mm,
issues. So you saw something in the U.S. recently where there was a Chevy dealer which basically integrated an AI-driven chatbot, and it
yep,
basically sold a car for $1. Right? You saw Air Canada, where they had an issue where they had similarly a refund policy that was completely hallucinated, and a judge told them that they had to live by that. So there's just these types of things that we've
yeah.
we've been overly trusting both on the user side as well as the enterprise and consumption side, and we need to bridge
Yeah.
that gap. We need a mechanism so that we can start to feel more comfortable. And you've seen this in large enterprises where AI governance communities have now stood up
Mm,
as a
mm.
cross section between AI leadership, AI security, compliance, legal, privacy, and others. And I think that's a really healthy starting point. But now we need to start really making sure that we have tools and technologies to help support that effort as people are really looking at AI governance more meaningfully.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think it definitely comes down to having that kind of full holistic approach across the business now when this type of technology is being integrated for sure. And I always think as AI is like, hopefully Microsoft won't mind me saying this, but like using it as a co-pilot for like humans to then be better or to have more reach or more, I guess, access to things quicker, thereby be able to kind of maybe keep up with the exponential change. And I think that's something we've always looked at. Infinum is like, how can we leverage AI for our clients, for ourselves, as constantly as like ongoing, like not a replacement tool, but more as a co-pilot to kind of give the human beings we're working with a bit more like superpowers to kind of deliver things better, faster, stronger. And
But that's,
yeah,
that's hard, right? Like
mm,
you say that we want to do that, but then when you think about doing that in an organization,
yeah,
getting people to make that change has been radical. It's been very difficult, and you're seeing organizations having to take some radical changes. So, at
mm,
Cranium, we build it into our OKRs. Like, how do we use our AI platform not only in the product, but also to how to actually use it in the business so that we can get better advantage. And I think this is going to shape how people are going to be successful or not in their companies. Unfortunately, fortunately or unfortunately,
yeah.
they really take this to heart and build AI into their workflows and use this, and businesses that enable that process are going to be more successful fundamentally than those that don't.
Yeah, I love you said that actually, because some of the process in which we run, say, discovery at Infinum, things like user research, like MVP or prototyping, or just even wireframing, things like that, or using synthetic data, synthetic testing, like it's already here. So actually leveraging that is just about helping us help our clients faster get to where they want to be in the market. So yeah, I think you're right. I think the trusting is definitely becoming a bigger thing, but yeah, you're right. Leaning more towards it is it's a healthier way, I suppose. And I just wanted to kind of step back from the kind of the tech and the trust for a minute because I was really intrigued about we started this conversation saying you were spun out KPMG, which I think is a great kind of accolade in itself. And I know from experience of myself working with startups and having a venture company back in the day and things like that, just leveraging that experience and using that to kind of model and support innovation through like a KPMG. How did you guys, how did you guys like go through that as a corporate innovation piece? Because it feels much more complex than say, hey, I'm going to start a company and just find an investor. I imagine there's a lot more red tape and a lot more, things to consider when you're trying to build in-house inside an innovation studio.
I think anytime you're trying to do something for the first time, it's always hard, right? So
Right.
we were the first
Yeah.
business to go through this KPMG studio, but we learned a ton through that process. I do think what's really interesting to me is that I think that what it shows is that there was a huge desire on
Mm,
KPMG's part to really lean into innovation, to invest in it in a way where it could not just be in the background, it not just be part of a discussion, but actually show how we could actually build inside of the firm, do something that would enable us to build a market leader, and
mm,
that was the premise. And I think we've successfully done that. Right, we have spun a business out which has really shown leadership in the market. Now has again some of the largest clients in the world, working on one of the most meaningful problems in the world, and a
yeah.
challenge that if we don't solve, again, really really interesting things happen downstream that we have to be careful of. Right, so I find
Yeah.
that is why I get up. Why I'm so excited about this business. And I think
Mm,
when I look back at the time, with KPMG, I think there was an awareness. I don't think anybody really knew like exactly how this could get done. There was a lot of negotiation around, okay, how do we deal with like issues related to spinning a business out of one of the biggest entities in the world,
yeah.
highly regulated, right? We need to make sure that we put the proper guardrails in place. We understand those challenges that we could face. And I think, now that we've accomplished this, I think it's been highly successful. When we were first doing it, I wasn't sure. Like it was the first time
Who knows?
anybody
Yeah.
had ever done it. So I would say there was just a recognition again that we wanted to do, build innovation into the world, and not just from a consulting perspective, but actually true applied innovation. And I think that I think we achieved that goal.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I'd say the main proof here is the work, right? The business exists; it's out there doing things, a market leader. So that's most of the time I imagine that's when I'm speaking to clients. Like the ideas are great, but it is really the work that matters, and it's the outcomes that generally are the guiding light, rather than just the big idea. It has to be the work. And I suppose on the idea of that, plus what we talked about with trust and safety, I can only imagine you're up against constantly shifting regulations, from different countries as well. Maybe US and EU are different. UK might be different again. How do you like manage that, and how do you almost recommend for business owners to kind of like keep an eye on these regulations that must be like as fast moving kind of as the technology, to kind of keep things contained or at least monitored in some safe way?
Well, I think a lot of people have started to hear now about the EU AI Act, right? So this has become one of
Mm,
the most focused efforts over the last couple of years to drive a regulatory standard for emerging technology and AI, especially as the architectures have moved around so much in that same period,
mhm.
as we talked about, so that you could put some legislation that would enable EU member firms to be able to at least get a handle on how AI is going to impact these countries. And so we've been kind of we've leaned in very heavily into that. We launched a hub in Ireland. So we worked with KPMG and Microsoft.
Yeah.
So KPMG Ireland specifically wanted to, build out a capability. We wanted to support that as well with Microsoft, and think about what it would mean for an organization to become ready, like drive readiness for the EU AI Act, even at an early stage, knowing that, downstream AI systems that would be in scope for this, non-compliance could be extraordinarily costly. So you saw
Mm,
GDPR historically.
of
That
course.
was an intensive effort by most organizations. In a lot of ways, they only started to comply with that after the law hit, and there was a recognition that, in a lot of ways, people got behind the ball. But there was a lot of teeth in that one, right? 4% turnover, those types of things. I think the EU AI Act is actually even more aggressive, right? So as people are really
Mhm.
pushing forward, they're building AI at this massive pace. And now the regulatory burdens in Europe are starting to take hold, and non-compliance for this will be at 7% of turnover. So there's
Yeah.
even more, almost double, right? Like, so people are starting to really think about how they're going to comply with that. And as a
Yeah.
backdrop to that, similarly to what you saw in the with privacy in the U.S., you now have presidential executive order in the U.S. around AI, which details a lot of the same things in terms of risk, safety,
Yeah.
security, and the goals of the federal government. You see individual states in the U.S. now. You're seeing leadership from New York, New Jersey, California. Almost every state in the union will likely have an AI act or executive order as well, tied very
Mm,
heavily. We sit on the NIST AI Security Consortium. That was a group of about 200 companies to really think about the standards with NIST as it's
mm,
implementing these against the presidential EO. And every single major country in the world is also now starting. So you saw Singapore launch. They launched theirs. UK has launched theirs. You've seen Australia. You've seen Canada, and this is going to go unabated. China has their own, and so every country is now concerned about where AI is actually being built, how it's coming into these countries, what data, citizen
mm.
data, is getting impacted, and so you'll start to see all of these tailwinds. It's going to be a pretty interesting couple of years as all the legs start to move.
Yeah, absolutely. Because we did some research here at Infinum, several months ago, just as we're getting more into the AI world, and really just to get a sample as to, like you're saying, because it's an interesting time, it's a fast-paced time, and we get lots of people talking to us about innovation and product builds, and of course AI comes up all the time. And So we did this research to figure out what is the appetite for it, and actually what's the preparation for it. And actually, we found like 78% of people we talked to obviously plan to invest in AI tools, which makes no surprise. It's a hot topic. But what's really kind of like surprising slash shocking to me, at least anyway, was that 73% felt unprepared to actually integrate the tools they build into their operations, which is probably partly to do with like regulations, safety, and uncertainty around how to actually facilitate that into their business correctly. I suppose there's like a question around this as well, like how does one, I've got my new tech company over here, or my new banking company, hypothetically, Bradshaw's Bank, we'll call it, that is going to step into AI in some way, shape, or form. From your experience, how would you even begin to say, look, how do you create a successfully secure and compliant like AI implementation of anything? What's that first kind of step? Because it just feels like there's such a wide variety of things to think about and do at the start of this journey. You've done it. You're building a company that specializes in this. But where would you kind of like steer that ship a little bit for my hypothetical bank, for example?
So what happened when Gen AI first started to hit? You saw a separation. You saw those people that recognize that if they don't get on this train and in a
Mm,
relatively quick way, they're going to get left behind, right? And with exponential technologies, especially like AI, if you don't actually start building around it and your competitors do, the dynamics start to change dramatically, right? So there's a recognition you have to do this. You have to do something. You've got
I
to
do,
have
yeah.
you have to have an AI strategy. But I
Yeah.
think on the flip side now, there's also a recognition if you do this incorrectly or with an architecture that leaves you open to these threats and risks, that is almost just as bad as getting left behind because the
Yeah.
pace at which the impacts happen are just as swift or swifter than they were when we saw other technology transformations. And
Mm,
so I think that's why people are so uncomfortable. In a lot of ways, if I talk about cyber topics generally, it's been in the news so frequently for so long, you kind of know them off the top of your head. Like you know
right.
what a phishing attack is, right? Generally.
Yeah.
You know what malware is, you know what ransomware is, these topics generally are part of the dialogue. And in some ways how to solve for them. I think we
Mm,
now are at a point where we need a level of education and discussion around AI specific threats and risks and how to deal with them and the regulations thereof that are going to be
mm,
very similar. I would say a year from now, 2 years from now, you're going to know what those look like just because we're having these dialogues. You're going to start seeing some of these pop up in the news. You're going to start seeing
yeah.
conversations that, oh, well, I need to now think about this. Again, there's different architectures that people are really looking at.
Mm,
When we talk about retrieval augmented generation, or we talk about data poisoning, or we talk about these other types of risks and threats, these will become more top of mind. And I think that's what we're working through right now. It's this,
yeah.
how do I
Yeah.
get more comfortable? And I would say the first part is driving an understanding of how you think about AI. It was
Mm,
amazing to me over the course of the last year and a half. We actually have brought a lot of these roundtables together with different organizations and leaders from those organizations. And in general, I would say there wasn't really a good understanding of what even AI meant to them. There was definitely not consensus around that,
yeah.
what AI was, and but definitely not an understanding of what it meant inside the organization. So I think that's the first step. How do we think
Yeah.
about it? How do what are we going to do? What are we not going to do? And then how do we put a policy around this so that we can start to really govern that? How do we stand up our AI governance teams? And I think those are the things that people have tried to do now, or at least in the larger enterprises over the course of the last year and a half. The next step
Absolutely.
is really now thinking about how do I tool. I find it interesting that there are a lot of security companies that talk about AI security, but they don't have an AI team. And I always
Hmm.
find that very strange, right? So we have one of the best AI teams in the world focused on, retrieval and, kind of next generation AI systems use. And then we tie that with our best in class AI security capability and talent so that we can really stay abreast of those things. Using AI, how do we
Yeah.
actually build it into the product? How do we actually help support the pace and scale that we need in order to deal with these really, really fast moving,
Yeah.
significant, difficult challenges? And so now this year I think is all about how do I start getting that set and building, and I think you're starting to see that happen.
Mm. Yeah, it really makes me sort of resonate a lot where we've been into clients of late, and you're right. It's we have an AI committee, and you think, oh, great, that's good. We'll come in and talk about AI. What can we do to help you? But it's usually that kind of okay, we know it exists. We have to do something, but we don't know yet what that means for each of our different either like verticals in the business or our teams. Like, how do we do that? So I think what you're saying there is so true. It's like yes, it is about engineering to a degree, and that's always the bench of like everything getting done from a technical side. But first of all, like the first engagements, many engagements really are that kind of how do we understand what it does for each type person in the business or the verticals they represent, and how does that actually like get protected and governed and understood first before you even touch anything technical, really. And it's quite interesting to hear your take as well. Like that exists all over. Like it's not just. I always say to people I'm talking to, it isn't just you. It's we're lots of people who have a need for it, but not a way to get there. We even started at Infinum the kind of quick AI assessment on our website, actually, that we'll put a link to somewhere in our chat. But it is as simple as like, what do you know at the minute? It could be, 100 or zero. It just depends. What data do you even have at this point in time? Do you even understand what, regulation needs to go into this? And I think
Right.
all these questions are quite like triggering. Sometimes they're like, yeah, we should do, but we don't. Or some people just say we've no idea. I think it's such an interesting time for this, just to really be the guide of like taking people on this like amazing journey, but hopefully a safe one with products like yours in the world. And just on the topic of products, I mean, how do you guys take feedback and feature implementation? As a product team, because I imagine you must hear and learn new opportunities and new risks all the time, where you're thinking, we got to like address this somehow in the product. Like, how do you guys like deal with that?
Yeah, it's interesting. I would say there's two answers to that. One is, we work with our clients directly every day to really think about, how are we improving the things that we do already. So, if you look at our platform, it's really, how do I get visibility into my AI systems? There's so many new AI capabilities and systems and products coming on the market. Like we need to know how those are going to take form. We think we do that great, but there's always going to be this kind of continuous improvement of, well, now I have this other system. I need to think about these things, or
Mm.
somebody's integrating this into another code set, and we need to be able to support that. For us, we recently launched at RSA something called exposure management, which kind of is a combination of a lot of the things that we've been building, but to try to drive exposure management on top of that. So how do we actually think about those threats? When we do the threat modeling, now we need to keep up to date. We need to think about the threat intelligence and building that out and using what we're learning as we're building with clients so that that continues to form inside of the product. And then
Yeah,
other clients get benefit as we add more clients to the product, right? So it becomes this kind of very virtuous cycle of, seeing something, protecting others, and being able to do that.
yeah, yeah.
The compliance piece of this is also, and we think about compliance and third party risk, through the use of our Cranium AI card. And, part of
Mm,
that innovation and thinking about it comes from, we know that market really well. We think about those things and we want to be able to build around these securely. So if we're using it and we know that there's an opportunity. So, it's kind of like the combination of really getting deep with clients, understanding how they're building and changing and doing it, and then looking
yeah,
forward. What do we need? How do we think
yeah,
about it? What are the
yeah,
things that we think the market could really benefit from, and building towards those, and then being able to support that as well. So we do that. Our engineers have a lot of latitude in terms of how they pick features, but also giving enough time on the research side so that people can really spike those things that are interesting to them.
I love that. I love that. We're talking in worlds of like technology and AI and all the future stuff. Well, actually, like some of the best ways to just get things done the right way is kind of like that humanistic. Like let's work together. Like humans is collaborating to figure out what people want, how to use it, what is the best way to develop a new feature or avoid a risk. I think that's a big part of like that we believe in that quite strongly, where we're always trying to add continuous value and discovery with our clients. So it's never just get something done here. It's like again back to that circular motion. Let's just figure out how can we just keep adding value and keep helping them navigate because the world changes so fast, especially in this like, space. What can we do to support them as humans?
Absolutely.
And
And look, some things aren't going to work out. So you have to make sure those are, you've got, good design partners and clients that are going to work with you, as especially as a startup, right? Like, something's not going to work. We need to be able to move around it. And so I think keeping that flexibility and having that ability to move fast becomes
Yeah,
paramount, especially at our phase.
totally. Yeah, and I guess keeping on the human riff as a leader as well. How do you get the best out of your product teams? The humans in your business.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is a stressful time for, our
Mm,
teams, right? So we're in a really important space. It's, becoming more competitive. We have to make sure our clients are, we're driving value for clients. And we have a group of people that, are the best in what they do, and they're in high demand as well. So I think it's a combination of building a culture that really focuses on really hard problems, because people want to know that their work is meaningful. So, sometimes people talk about, well, I want to be able to, uh, I want this, or I want this benefit, or I want dry cleaning. I think the most important thing that people want, not only just to be in a place working with really talented folks, and they expect, to work with smart people, I think is solving really big challenges. I just find that more and more, if we can offer a place where we can resource appropriately, we can give people an opportunity to go solve these big problems and do it with really smart people. That is just an amazing opportunity that people in very few, they see very infrequently in their lifetime, right? Where you can be at a startup that's one of the leaders in their space. We're working with great clients, solving a big problem, and that's really how we focus on it. And our core values also help, buttress that, right? So no jerks. We don't want, we really made sure, we want people, to have respect. We want to make sure, we drive diversity. We're doing things that are going to be helpful to the environment. So we're always careful to think about that. So we buttress all of these things appropriately. But
yeah,
I think at the crux of it is, if we can solve those really big problems, we're going to drive success into the market.
yeah. I love that. No jerks. No, rule number one. I love that. Wherever you work, whatever you do.
We try that really hard. Sometimes you get into heated arguments that
Yeah,
border on some of that sometimes, but I think that ultimately need to be healthy and respectful. And so I think
I,
that's where we draw the line.
I love that. Yeah, and ideally have a background in magician based stuff and chocolatier
And if,
based.
if anybody gets beyond that, we just make them disappear. Yeah, that's it. That's it. That's the
Okay,
magic.
well, that's a great way to wrap that up. So, look, we've got a bunch of questions from audience, and I'm conscious of time. So, if I may, I'm just going to ease us into a few questions and see what we can say here from our wonderful audience. So, the first question we've got here is from Steve. And how do you assess the current robustness of your business model and evaluate it in the face of AI and Gen AI?
We started very early. This is a great question. So we started very early. We said we're an AI company, we're an AI security company, and we need to be able to use AI to build a business. So we've actually set goals specifically around, and not every problem is an AI problem. So let's be very clear. Like there are certain
Yeah.
things that we don't want to solve, but we've actually built an AI strategy that says, we want to use AI in our product, we want to use AI to build our product, and we want to use AI in the business to solve problems so that we can
Mhm.
scale. And we set out originally, we said, we don't, some startups, they start by hiring 1,000 people, and when they hit a wall, they fire 700 of them. That's like a classic startup kind of mentality. We
Yeah.
said we don't want to do that. Like we want craniacs, which is what we call our cranium
Oh,
team
I love
members,
that. Yeah,
craniacs
Craniac.
to benefit from innovation that they're building to solve problems by leveraging this, getting leverage that most organizations can't get. We set out targets, which I'm not going to bore everybody with, but that were really significant, and
Mm,
that if we can build a business model that is built around this, not only will we keep flexibility, we'll be able to go at a velocity that no other business at our phase can go. But that business model will help us support, helping to drive domination in a market, right? So that's the ultimate
yeah.
goal, is to really go drive that market forward. So I feel like we're on our path to do that. It really takes strong talent and a will to build that in the business, and it's hard, but that's kind of how we
Yeah.
think about it.
I love that. I love the fact they're also called Craniacs as well. That's
Yeah,
yeah,
and you should see it. Our craniacs, we just got them all together. We
yeah.
call inside the company, we call our praise system a headbang. So like if somebody does something great and somebody wants to recognize it, they
All
headbang
right.
them. And we
Oh,
called
I
our
love that.
get together the headbangers ball. It was great.
Love it. Culture. Beautiful. Yes, look, we've got one more question I think we'll take just to keep us to time. So moving away from Craniacs and all that good stuff. It's more of a question about LLMs in the company. So who in the company should have the ultimate responsibility for which LLMs you'll be using to train your models? So who in the company, yeah, who would have the responsibility for the LLMs and training those models inside a business? That is a good question.
Yeah, so let's talk about that question first. So when we talk about the ways that models get trained, depending on how you think about this, we do have some models we use that are open source. We pull those in, we put them into a RAG architecture, we fine tune them,
Mm.
and we do that work. Um, we think about training those models in some cases to support especially smaller models inside of our product. So we've got a combination of kind of foundational open source and smaller models. And then there's also just the use of, kind of more closed source, foundational LLMs, GPT-4
Yeah,
or
yeah.
40, some of these models that you would integrate into your system. So we kind of have all of those things.
Mm.
Our AI security chief, Josh, I mentioned to you earlier,
Yes.
our AI security teams roll up to him, our product teams roll up to him, and our research teams roll up to him. At Cranium, he is the responsible person for making sure that those things come together so that we can research at pace, we can build at pace, and we can build our AI security piece. And we have a framework called build, attack, defend. So as our yellow team, the build team is building, we use our red teams to attack, we use our blue team to defend, and we use AI in the provision and support of all those things. I think you're asking about our products mostly, but we
Yeah.
also use the AI in our platforming so that we can support those efforts. And so that's in at least at Cranium. That's who we have doing it. I think in different organizations, we see large enterprises that this AI governance. About fifty
Yeah. Yeah.
percent of the time, it's a CISO. 50% of the time, or the rest of the time, it's a combination of either head of AI,
Mm.
somebody like a CIO, or somebody in risk or privacy generally.
Love that. Yeah. A whole education there about red blue teams and the yellow teams in the middle. Love that. So I have one more question. If you've got the energy for it, one last question, then we'll let you go back to fighting the good fight in the world. How do you create a culture of innovation at Cranium AI? It's a big question, or it could be a small question. Depends how you look at that. How do you do that?
I think we try to say yes. I think when we look at the things that people bring to the table, what I've always found is we want to create an environment where people are looking to solve big problems, and when we see something we want to solve, we have if we have the capability to solve it, and we can go do that. We've written multiple patents now around some of the things that we have gone this way. We want to say yes and we want to go after it. And some times it's going to work great. And in other cases, it's
Yeah.
not. I think being at the phase that we are at as a startup enables us, to kind of do that in a way that, I think more mature businesses struggle with sometimes, right?
Mm.
Innovation generally it comes from your people. It comes from great ideas and solving problems. In some cases, again, those that clients are bringing that we know are being asked for and developed in need or support of a client demand. And in some cases, they're things that are going to launch you into outer space because people say, I think we can do this and I'm not sure, but we want to test it. And we say, yes, let's go after it. And that's kind of how we think about it.
Yeah. Love that. Say yes. Be a craniac. A
Be a
magician.
craniac. Say yes. I love it. Well, I don't do magic as much anymore. It's
Oh, okay. Well,
not as,
hopefully
not
one
as much.
day. One
Yeah.
day. Well, look, I think that is a beautiful way just to kind of wrap up all this big conversation. I feel like we've gone all over the world and round again to kind of get to a point where, there's some great knowledge there. So thank you again for coming, Jonathan. It's been a great conversation. Thank you for being part of Delivered. And yeah, let's keep in touch and keep doing the good work with Cranium AI. We really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Well, a big, big thank you to Jonathan. I think I've learned so much already just from that 1 hour with him. And thank you for all of you for coming along as well to watch our Delivered show, be part of the conversation, ask your questions. We thank you so much for that. And a quick additional thing to point you to, we have an AI readiness survey on our website, infinum.com. It's the quickest and easiest way to find and explore possibilities with your business and AI. Just 6 questions. And from there, you'll get things like a technical readiness assessment, use cases, things that might help you move forward in your next AI solution. So feel free to go on there. There'll be a link somewhere shared in our chat box. Check it out. And also, just to add more value to you coming along today, be sure to check out also our AI report, which we mentioned earlier in the conversation with Jonathan. And from that, we'll be looking at how we can help you do a cheat sheet to make some good, ethical, strategic decisions in your AI investing. And basically, again, that will be in the chat below. And last but not least, if you want to show anything else and see anything else on Delivered, go to infinum.com/delivered, where you'll see any of the old episodes we've done. You can sign up to our newsletter and get all the latest information as we get new guests on the show. And that being said, that's it. I've been Chris Bradshaw. This has been Delivered. Thank you all for coming. Have a beautiful, beautiful day. Goodbye.